Hey, welcome back to Type 5 Reviews. I'm in the middle of opening up the pool for this summer season, and this year I decided to go with the INTEX 16-inch sand filter system. So let me show you what you're going to need to set this up, and I'll walk you through step by step on how I'm hooking it up myself, and then at the end I'll give you some of my thoughts on how this system works. Now, besides what's included with the system itself, you're going to need up to 150 pounds of pool filter sand. You'll also need a screwdriver to tighten the ring between the valve and the filter itself once we fill it up. And I recommend a large oil filter type of wrench to secure down all of those larger hose connections. So let's get to putting this all together. Now, before you start filling up the system with sand, make sure you position it so that the filter points towards the outlet back to the pool and that it's close enough that the included hose will reach back to the system. You'll also want the pump side to be closer to the inlet hoses coming from the pool into the pump. Next, you want to position this inner stem in the center of the filter and cover up that inner tube with the included cap that comes with your pump. If you don't have this included ring system, you could just use a plastic cup or something to cover that up while we fill it up with sand. After you fill it up with one bag, go ahead and spread that out there in the center, and we're going to take a hose and fill up the bottom with a little bit of water, and then we'll add the rest of that sand into this system. Make sure when you're filling it with sand, you get it between the minimum and the maximum line here on that middle stem. Notice how I'm also pre-filling this filter with water as well as I fill it up with sand, because I don't want there to be any air pockets in the system that get trapped once we turn the pump on. Next, we're going to seat the valve on the top. Make sure that this top surface is clear of any debris and that it's sitting down flush, and that your inlet and outlet ports are facing in the final direction that you want them to be. You're going to add this ring around the top, and then when we go to tighten the ring on, you're going to want to tighten a little bit from each side so that you get even pressure so that there are no leaks. I also want to mention that the gaps of this ring should line up with this line here between the valve and the filter, so that when you tighten this on, it doesn't interfere with any of these hose connections. Next, we'll want to attach the small hose between our pump and inlet port on our sand filter. Make sure these included rubber gaskets are in place so that you don't get any leaks as well. Also, make sure that you're not over tightening these connections. You'll then want to connect the hose between the inlet port on your pool to the inlet port on the pump. It can be helpful to get the end of the hose just a little bit wet so that it slides onto the fitting a little easier before using the clamp to screw it down. To finish the connection back to the pool, run from the outlet port on the filter back to the outlet port into the pool. Again, you can get the end of this hose wet so that it slides a little easier onto the valve itself. Now that all the connections are made, before we turn it on, I want to make sure that this is in filter mode, and then I'll go around and open up all of these individual valves, and I can use the relief screw on the pump itself to make sure that I bleed the air out of the system, and then it'll be ready to turn on. The first time you go to run your pump, you're actually going to want to set it to backwash first. You'll turn the pump on and then let it discharge for 30 seconds to a minute, depending on the size of your pool, until the water comes out clean. You'll turn the pump off, and then you'll change it over to rinse. You'll run this again for another 30 seconds to a minute until the water runs clean. This will get the sand to settle in your filter so that when we turn it off and then flip it over to filter and finally turn it back on, the pump will run properly and it won't shoot any sand into your pool, and you'll be ready to start filtering. Using the built-in timer for this pump is also really easy, and INTEX includes a chart for the recommendations on how long to run your filter pump based on the size of your pool. But to change the number of hours you want the pump to run for, we'll just turn it on. We'll press the lock/unlock button, and then we can press this timer button to switch the number of runtime hours from 1 hour a day all the way up to 12 hours a day. Or we can run it continuously in this FP mode until we want the pump to stop. So I'm gonna set it for a couple hours and let it run. Well, the pump's up and running great, but the water's not looking too hot. I have well water here, and it has a lot of iron. So I'm gonna be adding some iron removal product, and then we'll see how long it takes for the pump to filter all of this out. You may have noticed that I also hooked up my INTEX wall mount skimmer. My old pump wasn't strong enough to really run this properly, but this new pump looks like it has plenty of power. One thing that I want to note is that you'll want to slightly close off this second side. The skimmer itself comes also with a little plug with a hole in it if you don't have one of these closable valves. So then you would put that over the cover. But I have this just barely cracked open to let a little bit of water through the system because I don't want to choke off the pump and have air get into that system. But so far it's working great. Well, it's the next morning. I let the filter run all night, and I'd say that this water is about 90% clear. It would take me about 2 days just to get to this point with the old filter. So we're gonna keep it running and try to get all of the color out of this water, but I'm really happy with it so far. Now, if you've been running the pump for a while, you may notice some debris that starts to get trapped inside of this strainer basket. So to clear this out, we're just going to close the inlet and outlet ports to the pump, and then we'll loosen up the top ring of this strainer basket so that we can empty out the contents. Just make sure that when you go to place that basket back in, that you seat the O-ring around the top correctly, and don't forget to bleed the air out of the system after you've opened up all the valves and turned back on the pump. Well, after running the pump for the last couple of days, this water is probably the clearest that I have ever seen it before. I am ridiculously impressed with how well this pump works. And if you are still using a filter cartridge pump type of system, I would really highly recommend save yourself a lot of time and headache and get yourself one of these sand filter systems. I wish I would have switched over to one a lot sooner. It would have saved me a lot of effort on keeping this pool up and running. I have plenty of power to run my skimmer, run my vacuum, anything else that I want to do, and it saves me a bunch of time to move on and do other things around the house. So if you're interested in one of these sand filters yourself, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can check one out. If you like this video and you'd like to see more like it, feel free to subscribe to the channel. But that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully, I'll see you all on the next one.